An adult Turritopsis dohrnii is only about 4.5 millimeters across. When it's starving, injured, or hit by a sudden change in temperature or salinity, it can shrink, pull in its tentacles, and collapse into a small mass. Then it begins rebuilding itself as a juvenile polyp. That sounds like a creature refusing to die. And honestly, immortal jellyfish feels like a perfectly reasonable name. The trick is not in the size, it's in the two bodies this animal can occupy. The adult medusa is the free swimming form we picture when we hear jellyfish. The polyp is something else, attached, stationary, and often living as part of a colony. So Turritopsis doesn't simply repair an injured adult body and keep going. Under severe stress, it can leave that adult form behind and rebuild the earlier stage it passed through before maturity. The species was first described in the 1880s from the Mediterranean Sea. The reversal itself became widely recognized much later, with observations from the 1990s helping establish why this tiny hydrozoan would become such a powerful scientific curiosity. The timeline is what makes this so startling. It has already reached sexual maturity. Then it goes backward. That raises a very uncomfortable little question. If the animal can return to youth, what exactly counts as aging? The answer begins at the level of the cell. And this isn't a simple rewind. The jellyfish's tissues reorganize. Cells that had specialized for one job can change identity and help build something else. Biologists describe that process as transdifferentiation, a direct change from one specialized cell type into another, rather than a whole body simply returning to an untouched blank state. Then the reversal becomes visible in the body. The body contracts, forms a cyst-like mass, and begins producing the structures of a polyp. This requires coordinated remodeling across tissues, not just the replacement of one damaged part. Eventually, that renewed colony can bud off genetically identical medusae. One stressed jellyfish can, under the right conditions, begin the cycle again. Hold on, so it doesn't just survive damage, it changes life stages. That's the moment when the headline starts feeling almost too small for the biology. The repeatability is where the nickname gains its dangerous confidence. Captive observations have recorded the adult form disappearing as a juvenile colony begins to grow. Other captive reports describe rejuvenation up to 10 times over 2 years. That does not mean every individual in the ocean calmly returns to youth whenever life becomes difficult. We don't know how often this happens in the wild, how many cycles a single animal can complete under natural conditions, or whether all populations behave in exactly the same way. Most of the detailed evidence comes from laboratory and captive observations. Those limits matter because a remarkable laboratory response is not the same thing as an everyday ecological habit. Still, repeated reversal is not a myth created by a dramatic headline. It is a real biological response. Stress can trigger it, starvation can trigger it, physical damage can trigger it. A sudden environmental shift can trigger it, including a sharp change in temperature or reduced salinity. The animal isn't choosing youth because it's tired of adulthood. It's reorganizing under stress. Some reported reversals begin within roughly 24 to 36 hours. Repeated post-reproductive rejuvenation of this kind is considered extraordinarily rare among animals. Turritopsis dohrnii is the only metazoan known to show it repeatedly in the available evidence. So before we let one word take over the story, we need to make that word smaller. The word immortal needs a narrow definition here. Biologically immortal means that the animal may avoid death from ordinary senescence, the gradual decline associated with aging, if it successfully returns to the polyp stage. That is the entire claim, a limited ability to avoid one category of death, not a shield against the world. Mortality remains close to the surface. A predator can eat it. Disease can kill it. A bad environment can kill it. Severe damage can end the process before reversal succeeds. The animal still depends on food and seawater, and the long-term limits of repeated rejuvenation remain uncertain. The eerie part is not an adult jellyfish appearing to look younger. It is an adult body giving way to a colony, as if the organism has opened a developmental door most animals pass through only once. The unusual route matters more than the dramatic label. This is ontogeny reversal, development moving from a later life stage back toward an earlier one. The life cycle is not only strange at the level of anatomy. The molecular evidence turns that strange life cycle into a research problem. In 2022, researchers compared Turritopsis dohrnii with a mortal relative that does not show the same repeated rejuvenation. They found differences in systems involved in DNA repair, cell cycle control, and the regulation of cell identity. The comparison becomes useful when the cells start changing their instructions. During reversal, the analysis reported silencing of targets associated with polycomb repressive complex 2 and activation of pluripotency-related targets. In simpler terms, some developmental programs were being shut down while others linked to a more flexible cellular state became active. Candidate mechanisms include stronger DNA repair activity, altered control of the cell cycle, and changes in pathways associated with stem cell-like potential. Those findings help explain how a mature medusa might stabilize cells while its body plan is being dismantled and rebuilt. That's a clue, not a finished explanation. Finding a pattern in gene activity does not prove that one particular gene controls rejuvenation. Biology is rarely generous enough to provide a clearly labeled switch. The body has to coordinate many tissues at once, and scientists are still working out which changes cause the reversal and which are simply consequences of it. A genomic clue can open a door without telling us what is behind it. Still, I find this part more compelling than the immortality headline. The animal suggests that an adult body can retain access to older developmental instructions. Those instructions aren't being invented from scratch. They're being reopened. That open door invites a human question. Could we use this to reverse aging? Could we make damaged tissues rebuild themselves? Could the jellyfish eventually teach us how to restore cell identity in human medicine? Maybe it can teach us something. But there is no evidence that a person could safely transform adult tissues back into an earlier body plan. Humans and Turritopsis are separated by enormous differences in anatomy, development, and cellular organization. The tempting leap runs into a very different body plan. And honestly, I would prefer our first attempt at regeneration not to involve becoming a stationary colony attached to a pier. The useful connection is more modest and more realistic. Regenerative medicine studies how cells repair damage, change identity, and rebuild tissue. Turritopsis gives researchers a rare natural example of those processes occurring across an entire life cycle. It shows what developmental flexibility can look like when evolution has taken the idea much further than human bodies do. That modest connection is still powerful. Any translation into human medicine remains speculative, but the biological question is solid. How can differentiated cells change course without losing the coordination needed to rebuild a body? The question reaches beyond one jellyfish. It touches aging research, stem cell biology, developmental biology, and comparative genomics. Turritopsis is useful not because it hands us a recipe for eternal life, but because it makes cell identity visible as something more flexible than we usually assume. The laboratory value is in that rare combination: a mature animal, a reversal of development, and a body rebuilt through changing cellular identities. For Turritopsis dohrnii, adulthood isn't the final form. It's a stage the animal can sometimes leave behind.